in this context, 0 is a really big number. So I'm really pleased to have you here today, David, and I am going to just go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you. Great. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Perfect.
Well, it was really a breath of fresh air to see what you guys are doing out there with this Tompkins, what's the full name? Tompkins County Collective Initiative, something like that.
Yeah.
It's impressive, the goals that you have there. And it's also wonderful to see efforts in other communities to put some financial support behind things with, like, it looks like you were looking to do some IDA and incentives potentially for, you know, folks who commit to building net zero energy structures. And I'll speak to why I think that kind of thing is super important when we get there, because we don't have the same kind of support here in New Paltz. And it's very frustrating for me because, anyway, we'll get into that in a second. So I want to tell you about Zero Place. I'm very excited about this building. It's really setting a new bar for New York. The state is looking at it and monitoring it independently because they see it as a true reference project to perhaps lead the way across the state and maybe across the nation and beyond. And so you'll get a sense of how special this building is. But it shouldn't be special, right? In my view, the kinds of technologies we're applying here exist off the shelf and can be applied all over the place. We didn't go out. We're not going to, you know, win the Nobel Prize for inventing some brand new technology. Absolutely not. Everything we're achieving here exists today and is readily available. Okay. Let's see.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, David. You know, this is off the shelf technology, I think is the way it's sometimes referred to.
Yep. Okay. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself so you understand my perspective. I'm not a developer by trade. I got into this because I have a personal passion towards finding climate solutions. And I think transforming every sector of our economy, every aspect of the way we live, is going to be essential if we have any chance of slowing and ultimately reversing the forces at play across the earth. And so I wanted to make a contribution into, at least in one of those sectors, and that's the building side. I began this because I pursued a net zero house back in 2009, and I'm actually talking to you from that home. And I've been net zero now for, gosh, how long is that? 11 years or so, or 12
Wow.
years. And it dawned on me, you know, a few years into this, wow, this isn't that big of a deal. It was pretty easy to accomplish. And why couldn't we do this at a larger scale? So I began to work with the guy who built my home and has a similar passion. And we started the initial steps towards seeing if we could do this at a much larger scale with, let's say, a mixed use multifamily residential structure. And so Zero Place was launched. But my day job, I'm the COO for an AI startup based near New York City, and I live up in New Paltz. I don't think I need to tell you why this kind of thing is so important. I don't know if you saw the New York Times just yesterday that Taiwan, I was very surprised to see that Taiwan is having a national crisis with water. Almost all of their reservoirs have dried up. They're in severe restrictions, and it looks desperate. I encourage all of you to see that New York Times article. It looks quite scary. And that's just one of countless examples of how stressed our ecosystems are and our communities. And we're going to face this more and more. I don't know if I, in my lifetime, will face the worst of it, but I'm certain that my grandchildren are going to see calamity like none of us can imagine. And I'm terrified of that. and we should be doing everything we can to try to contribute to this problem, to combating this problem. So the goal was to move, for me, is to move all buildings to operate with zero emissions. How do you accomplish this? Well, first it begins with electrification. And this is also true of transportation, right? So it's incredibly important that we also electrify our car and truck fleets, trains, et cetera. To do this, you have to make the building more efficient from top to bottom, the envelope of the building, the heating and cooling, and the domestic hot water, which is a really important piece of this. And I'll speak to that more soon. You don't actually need to create net zero structures, but you need to have what I call net zero ready structures. And what that means is you don't necessarily need to put the energy production on site like we have with our solar. But if you achieve a very high level of efficiency, then communities can create collective renewable energy production, and if the buildings are functioning efficient enough, then the community at large can become net zero, even if a particular building is not, because not every building is going to have the roof space that we do, and so forth. So that's a really important thing to understand. Then there's the operational piece of this that is often forgotten. How do you encourage the residents in a multifamily structure to operate in a responsible way and contribute to the overall mission of the building? I'll speak to that in a minute. And then once you've moved everything at the problem, you've concentrated it on the electric system, then you have a single point that you can address to turn from a fossil fuel world into a carbon-free one. And that is turning all of the creation of electricity into renewable sources. And by the way, personally, I believe that nuclear is a part of that mix. We shouldn't throw nuclear out. I think we can do it in a safe way, but that's for another time to discuss. Okay, so this is Zero Place. It's a mixed-use net zero energy building, 46 residential units, 25 two-bed and 21 one-bed units. There are 5 affordable housing units in the building. That's required now by New Paltz Village law. There's also 8,400 square feet of retail space. All of that is along the street frontage here. Can you see my mouse? Do you see a mouse moving on the screen?
No?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. I just want to be able to point to stuff. So all of the street frontage here, which is along this side, are all commercial spaces along the ground floor, hence why we call it mixed-use building, right? All of this is privately financed by myself and my partners. And we are not only going to build it, but also operate the building. We want to see this thing operate for many years and achieve the goals of the building. We broke ground in December of 2018. Oh, you'll see that this was an old presentation that I've updated the pictures, but I didn't update the text. Originally, we hoped to open as of December 2020, and then a big thing called the pandemic hit, and we're still under construction. So we probably won't open until September. All sorts of effects from, mandatory pauses in construction due in the early days of the pandemic, all the way to the full effects across the supply chain, from window deliveries and door deliveries and everything in between. So it's been quite a thing to manage that, as of so many aspects of our economy, right? Okay. So I'm also proud to say that Zero Place became the first winner of New York State's Buildings of Excellence Award in 2019. There were other awardees as well, and this was presented by the Lieutenant Governor back in 2019, and really, just reaffirms and validates our belief that our building is fundamentally new and important for the state. NYSERDA is investing in an independent monitoring system of not only the whole building's performance, but also the geothermal solution, and you'll see why here in a minute. But they're very, very interested in the solutions that we've brought together, and they want it to independently monitor so that they can say that, wow, this combination of technologies really achieves what these guys say it can. Ultimately, with the goal of informing policy for the state moving forward as they try to achieve the most aggressive climate goals now in the country, thanks to the legislation that passed in 2019, with a commitment to achieve carbon neutrality across the state by 2050, which is a tall order. Just to give you a sense of the goals of our energy targets for the building, you can see in the left column what Energy Star requires today to achieve the Energy Star goals. And you can see that we hope to exceed that quite, more than double the energy performance of the building. I mean, you can see how that breaks down across these different dimensions: heating, cooling, water heating, which is a really important one, and lights and appliances, etc. I'll specifically point out the water heating because you can see that Energy Star requires 6.1, and we are going to achieve that at this is probably depending on how you want to express the math. We believe we can achieve levels that are, about 5 times as efficient as what Energy Star requires around water heating, or 20% of the total energy load compared to what Energy Star does. And you'll see how that's achieved with our geothermal piece here in a minute. Just to express this in other terms, there's a cool website that DOE puts out to translate these different things into trees saved, coal, avoided, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so how do we achieve this? Well, it all starts with the envelope. This is a thing that the sexier parts of things like solar panels and geothermal systems are important, of course, but nothing is more important than the envelope. You don't want to be throwing away energy by having a poorly constructed envelope using lesser performing windows, etc. So just point out some of the features. We decided on insulated concrete forms for a couple of reasons. One, we believe in building a building that will last for centuries, not decades. So my partners and I firmly believe that building structures with sticks, like is so common across the country, just makes no sense. It turns into buildings that are going to start having major problems in fairly short time. My partner, I just like to tell this story. My partner is from Switzerland originally, or his family is. And when he took them on a tour once of all the homes that he was constructing about 20 years ago, because they were helping finance some of his efforts, he was doing things the conventional way, and he would show them these McMansions, and they were absolutely shocked to see that these giant, expensive homes were being built with 2x4s. And because they're used to seeing cinder block construction and a commitment to structures that are going to last a really long time. And so they said, look, we will provide the underwriting for your efforts here on one condition: you build buildings that are going to last, no sticks. So that ethic has continued through today. And so we're using insulated concrete forms, which are these styrofoam forms that provide the wall insulation for the building, that are filled with concrete. And while concrete is a carbon intensive material, unfortunately, when you amortize that carbon cost over centuries, it's actually very little. It really reduces the impact of that, because this building is going to stand for a very, very long time. Anyway, ICFs have a very high performance, not only from a number of different perspectives. They're absolutely airtight. They have a thermal mass in the concrete that contributes to their overall performance. The windows, we have purchased some of the most high performing windows, triple pane, argon filled, very high U values for windows. Of course, windows don't compare anything don't even come close to the performance of a wall, but we do what we can there as well. The slab of the building is also extra insulated, so there's foam underneath the entire building, and the roof assemblies also have open cell spray foam, a very high performing ceilings and roof, and airtight construction across the board. And we really look for vulnerabilities around thermal bridging. It's interesting for those of you who own single family homes. You know, I encourage one thing that's often overlooked is people don't insulate their basements. They don't insulate the ceiling of the basement. And because older homes, well, even 10 years back, the foundations are not insulated underneath. You have this enormous thermal mass underneath your home that often up to 50% of the loss of your home is going through the basement. We focus a lot on the ceiling, on the roof, and we forget that we're sitting on top of this massive thermal mass, and that's a real problem in older homes. Anyway, we don't have any of that kind of thermal bridging and thermal struggles in this building. It's insulated from top to bottom. From an envelope perspective, the building will perform 37% better than code, 65% tighter than the high requirements of New York State code, and it will save this much energy, just the envelope itself. Oh shoot, sorry about that. Oops. Hold on one second. Let me fix this. I wanted to update this image to show you the actual geothermal system here, and then I messed up with that picture. Sorry, I will share again. Okay, are we back? Yeah. So this is really the heart and soul of the performance of the building, our geothermal solution. This was installed by Buffalo Geothermal, which is an amazing company that's really setting the standard for geothermal performance. Out of Buffalo, the owner of it, Jens Ponnekow, is an MD, research MD by day and geothermal designer by night, and is doing amazing work. And we're going to have the first of a kind system at this scale at Zero Place. And I think Ithaca and the buildings there would benefit tremendously by what he can do. He probably already has a couple of projects in that area, I suspect. But why is this system so unique? Ultimately, it's a giant ground source heat pump that is drawing from 15 500-foot wells that are drilled below the building. And in this picture, you can see the loop that is drawing from these 15 wells. Each of these black insulated pipes right here are going to those 15 wells. We decided to put all the wells within the footprint of the building for a couple reasons. One, we believe that the building itself is going to act as a thermal cap for those wells and actually increase the performance of them. We'll see over time if our hypothesis is true, but we're really excited about that. The other reason is, if this works well, then you could imagine doing this in severely constrained areas like New York City, where a new building project could install wells beneath the building before the building is constructed, just like we've done. So demonstrating that is possible and effective is really important. Here's some other details about those wells, but I won't get too nerdy on that. But what's key is this system is providing all of the heating and cooling for the building, as well as the domestic hot water, which really makes it unique. Most geothermal systems in homes today are only providing the heating and cooling, and often when people have electrified their hot water systems, they just have a traditional thermal coil system. But this can achieve much higher levels of efficiencies by putting the hot water on the heat pump as well. And so we have giant tanks in this vault underneath the building that are providing that domestic hot water. There is one other building in the state that has also put its domestic hot water on its geothermal loop. And I believe that one's in Buffalo, and also built by Buffalo Geothermal. But it's a building that's much, much smaller than this one. So there are no systems comparable to this at this scale. And here are those before the building was constructed. You can see the loop, the loop field, the bore field here, and you can count. There are 15 wellheads in this picture. Oh, and just to explain why this is so interesting, we have enough geothermal capacity within the footprint of this building that we could support 28 stories. A building of 28 stories and provide all the heating and cooling hot water needs of it. Of course, the building's only 4 stories, but it shows you the potential of this kind of capability. Here's some statistics on the water furnace systems. Each unit will have its own heat pump that taps into this large circulating loop. So imagine that you're taking the water from these wells, you're keeping it at a constant temperature, you're circulating that water throughout the building, and each of these heat pumps is tapping into that. So when it needs heat for the building, it takes heat away out of that circulating loop. When it needs to cool the units, it's taking heat from the units and putting it into the geothermal loop. Interestingly, we believe at some times of the day, take summer, early morning, when one side of the building is being hit by the sun and the other side is in the shade, we actually expect the building to balance itself. That some of the units on the east side will want to be cooled, while the units on the west side will want to be heated, and they will actually balance this loop during the day, which is a really interesting phenomenon. And that can totally happen when you separate the heat pumps into individual units, as we've done. Here's the domestic hot water design. A lot of details here, but for the sake of time, I'll just push past that. I should also point out that NYSERDA has done some really great things here in terms of encouraging explorations like we've taken on here. NYSERDA provided us $109,000 in efficiency rebates for this geothermal system. They've helped with some design reviews. They're going to be doing quality assurance inspections of this. Again, they want to see if this kind of solution is as promising as the modeling suggests. So they're holding our geothermal solution as an absolute reference for the state. Okay, now let's talk about the solar piece of it. So we can't be a net zero energy building if we're not producing energy as well. And just to be clear, geothermal heating and cooling is not producing energy. All it's doing, it's actually using electric powered heat pumps. All that it's doing is it's creating a large sink through the geothermal wells to allow you to operate very, very efficiently. So I don't want people to be confused by a geothermal HVAC system versus a geothermal power plant, which is actually using like the magma core, of the earth and volcanic fissures to tap into actually creating energy, right? You see that in the Pacific Northwest and Iceland and so forth. That's not what this geothermal is. Our solar system is what's creating the energy and providing all the energy of the building on a net zero, on net terms. And what does that mean? The net piece of it is we're not able to produce energy at night. We're not able to produce a ton of energy in the winter months, right? So what it means is that over the course of the year, we will have produced enough energy to offset all of the demand of the building throughout the course of the year. And we're basically using the grid as a giant battery, right? So at night, we're drawing from the grid, and during the day, we're giving back to the grid. And similarly, in the winter months, we're tending to draw more than we're producing. And so we hope that the summer months sort of offset the winter months, and over the course of the year, we prove that we produce more energy than we've consumed. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, we have commissioned, and just yesterday this system turned on, so it's actually contributing to the grid right now, even though the building is unoccupied, which is super exciting for us because this is a big investment to create a field of this size. There's 688 sun power panels at 360 watts each. We're able to produce 248 kilowatts of instantaneous power at the peak. So it's a really, really impressive system. And hats off to SunCommon, who's the big solar solution provider in this area. Maybe they do stuff as far away as Ithaca, I don't know. But they installed the SunPower Helix system, which you see here on the roof. And really, we put solar panels everywhere we could. In the picture behind me, you see the aerial view of the building, which gives you a sense of that roof. We also put panels on the awnings on the south side, which you can also see in the picture behind my head as well. This is a rendering of the rooftop deck. In the shadow of the elevator enclosure, we decided to make a space for tenants. We could put some solar panels in the back here outside of the shadow, but anyway, we have plenty to meet the energy needs of the building, so we were able to carve out a little bit of space for our tenants. Oh, we're also investigating a Tesla, building grade, commercial grade battery as a power backup. Unfortunately, because you have to have an elevator in a building of over 3 stories, and ours is 4 stories, we have to have a generator backup solution so that people aren't stuck in the elevator, basically, right? And today, the battery solutions are not large enough to function for days on end if power is lost. So we actually do have a natural gas fired generator on premise, but we're hoping to have a battery solution too that could at least provide enough to get us through probably half of a day. So we're playing with that, and we're going to see if there's enough if we can in fact install that. Okay, the last piece, but a really important one, is the operations of the building. There's actually a constant debate among us. There's some like our energy rater, who's a really impressive guy who does all the kind of energy consulting in this area. He believes that this building, we're not going to really need to incentivize our tenants much. You just let the systems run; they take care of themselves. People are comfortable; they're not going to be tinkering too much with the heating and cooling. In fact, they're encouraged not to do that. Just to leave them set at whatever temperature they want and are comfortable throughout the year. But I want to be prepared to encourage my tenants to be as responsible as possible. So I've actually commissioned some of my ex-employees who are software developers to build an app for our building. Surprisingly, there are not good apps like this in existence today, so I had to do some custom software development. But basically, each tenant is going to have an app that tells them their instantaneous consumption of their heating, their HVAC system, as well as their plug load, their washers and dryers, everything. It'll tell them what they're consuming, their instantaneous, their previous day, their previous week, the previous month, and it will also compare them to the average of a comparable unit. So for the 2-bedroom units, they'll compare their consumption with one another, and 1-bedroom unit as well. And it will, so they will have full transparency into what they're doing and how they compare to their neighbors, obviously in an anonymous way. They're not going to know who's doing what. No one will understand what Bob and Jim and Sally are consuming, but they'll know how they compare to the average. We've thought about gamifying this, in fact, anonymously letting people compete and putting this on a big board in the lobby, and maybe creating some incentives, like you get a gift certificate to the restaurant downstairs or whatever. So we're looking at things like this to encourage people. But I think the main thing is just making your consumption transparent so that you know what you're doing. And so we'll see how that plays out. Some other features on the site, we're installing 20 EV charging stations. That'll be way more than we're going to use today, of course. We want to be ready for the hopefully the fast growth in EVs, in electric vehicles over coming years. We also sit adjacent to the Empire State Trail, which is a great feature of this building. So we're installing 50 bicycle racks on the property. We also have a bus stop on our property, which I'm hoping that some of these tenants will not even have personal vehicles. We'll see if that turns out, but you could function in our building without a private automobile. It's not super easy, admittedly, in the smaller towns like New Paltz, but we have the infrastructure to perhaps support that. And the other cool thing about these charging stations is each of them is equipped to charge an electric bicycle as well. So maybe if people want, they can get an electric bike, and they have all the infrastructure here to take care of that. We also have bike lanes along all the street frontage. And basically, we support the whole concept of complete streets, and we think our project really has the assets that are consistent with that concept. We're seeking LEED Platinum and LEED Pilot credit for passive survivability, which means that the building, if it loses all power, still maintains at least 50 degrees in an ambient state, meaning that if there's a crisis in the area, we can bring people into the commercial spaces, for example, to support them through emergencies. So cost is a really important piece of this, right? And I'm sure it's something that you're interested in. What would it cost for developers if you mandated these kinds of standards? Well, admittedly, there is an investment here, right? Solar isn't free. These geothermal solutions aren't free. A superior envelope is not free. We estimate that it's costing us somewhere on the order of a 20% to 25% premium over standard code. But we estimate that payback will come to us in 8 to 10 years. In other words, an upfront investment will actually continue to pay forever while the building functions. And you can anyway, we broke down some of those costs across these different elements just as an initial stab. Oh, I forgot to mention one thing when I talked in the additional feature section, and that is we have a really cool elevator solution. When the elevator is coming down, it's actually driving its electric motor in reverse and is generating electricity. So even the elevator is part of our overall concept. And we are also looking at creating a small gym for tenants, and we're thinking of purchasing these treadmills and bicycles that also generate electricity for the building when you're running on them or riding the bikes. And the thing even shows you how much you've produced for the building after you've finished your workout. That's a kind of cool systems. Another piece is we're collecting data up and down this building to understand how it's performing across all of these dimensions. That'll be very interesting for NYSERDA in the state. It will also allow us to tweak our solution over time. But we really, really want to understand how the building is performing and what makes sense to do for other buildings in the future, what works, what doesn't, et cetera. And you got to have the data to really look at that. I'm kind of a data nerd due to my day job, so I'm excited about diving into this aspect of the building as that data materializes. Just to give you a quick sense of how far we've come, this is the lot before it burned down. There was a fire in this old automotive repair shop. There was a climbing gym in the back of this building. Both of them burned down back in 2015. We jumped in, and the owner of this property decided that he just wanted to sell it and not reconstruct this business. So bought the land, and this is what the building looks like as of about a month or two ago. Again, we hope to open by September. This is what it looked like before. And I mean, sorry, this is what our rendering suggested and what it will ultimately look like once we've built, done all the landscaping and such. This is what it will look like from the pocket park along the south side. And here you can see a little GIF. I found myself quite impressed that the renderings we built before we even finished the total design, I don't know if you can see that thing going back and forth, but the actual building's turning out to look very, 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 very similar to the renderings, which makes me very happy.
Hey, David, how large is this building? I'm getting questions in chat about that.
Sure, it's a 4-story building with 46 apartment units, and about 8,500 square feet of retail space on the first floor.
So overall square footage?
It's 16,000 square feet per floor, roughly. So multiply that by 4. What is that? 64,000 square feet, roughly.
That's great. Thanks.
Yeah. Here's the project team. I'm the founder, but I have a couple partners. My architect is Dave Coder, who also was the architect of my home, by the way. We have the contract. One of my partners, Keith Leibolt's also building the building, doing the daily construction with his company, Affordable Housing Concepts. But I really want to call out Jens Ponikow and Buffalo Geothermal, and I strongly encourage folks. You're very close to Buffalo out there, and his work is just incredible. That's it.
Hey, Dave, just a quick note. I'm actually trying to get a hold of Jens in regards to another project in Ithaca, but I haven't gotten any response from him.
Oh, I can help you there.
That'd be great. Thanks.
You bet. What is that? Who was that? Brian?
It's Peter.
Yeah, no,
I'll drop him in.
no, I also talked to Jens. I'll go into it just briefly after this. But New York Geo is, has annual conferences of, in Albany. And the last 2 years it's been canceled. They've replaced it with a 27-part series. I think we're in about part 8 or 9 now. And Jens has presented on that on several occasions. And, it's Jens actually spoke here about 4 years ago. We ran a program at the public library. Mark Tompkins did, and he was on that panel. And there's a lot of things that you covered in your slides, one slide at a time. There's whole webinars on each aspect of those. I would, go to their website, folks, and look at the top job competition was really 5 different jobs that were competing for the best. Very well done projects. You'd learn a lot there. So anyway, that's my pitch.
Can I answer some of the questions I'm seeing in chat? Would you like me to address those?
Yeah, if you could, that'd be great.
Sure. Some of these are comments, and then I completely agree that we absolutely must electrify our systems. In my view, it's the only way that we can comprehensively address all of these large systems, right? So mandating that homes, that's essentially what you're doing when you say preventing fossil. I'm addressing the first comment about prohibiting the use of fossil fuels. In homes, you have to. The only alternative really is to electrify, right? The heating and cooling systems. And again, it's when you've created very efficient envelopes, those electric systems don't have an enormous load, so they can function very well. Whether it's geothermal or air source heat pumps, it's very possible to do that. So I strongly support that. The reason why we chose Geo, look, if you have the ability, it's harder to use Geo in retrofits because there's a lot more involved there. But when you have new construction, it's quite easy to do Geo. And Geo pays itself off over air source solutions over time because you have a think about this. In the winter, the ground temperature doesn't change once you're below about 7 to 8 feet. You know, you have a constant temperature of somewhere between 50 and 55 degrees underground. The air changes constantly, right? So you have air source heat pumps are trying to heat the home when it's 0 degrees outside, right? So you're competing with their sink. The ambient temperature of the air is severe in both the really hot days in the summer and really cold days in the winter. So air source heat pumps have a much higher task than the stable temperature of the ground, and that's why the little bit higher investment in a geosystem is superior over time. But for retrofits, when you've got a home that you're ripping out the fossil fuel thing, oftentimes an air source heat pump makes abundant sense in those cases. Let's see, probably the regulations. Are there individual compressors to support the heat-cool balance, or are there commercial units that can heat and cool at the same time? Yes, every unit, whether it's commercial or residential, has its own heat pump. So they independently can cool and heat. They decide what they want to do, and there's no problem with that. The loop that circulates throughout this building stays at a standard temperature because it's drawing from a massive geothermal field. So it doesn't matter, you know, the individual load on that loop field from any given unit. It really doesn't matter whether it's drawing heat or cooling, and so each unit can operate independently. I think that answers that question. So yes, there are individual heat pumps in every unit. And I think I've already answered the last one about the building size. Any other questions? Great.
Yeah, terrific. Thanks so much, David. That was it's very inspiring to see this building become reality and to know that it's very, very doable. What I want to do now, go ahead, David. What?
Sorry, the one thing I did want to say is a 20% premium is not inconsequential, right? You have to have the funding to be able to make that investment. And while we believe over the long haul, it will pay itself off. It is hard for a lot of the standard investment models, right? Most developers are not developing them so they can operate the building and see and realize the returns on those kinds of long-term investments, right? So a developer's not properly incentivized to invest in these kinds of systems. And this is where I think things like the IDA stuff that you had mentioned, giving people a break on property taxes so that this kind of stuff can be more, just while they're trying to stabilize the building for a couple of years is really helpful. We're not getting any of those breaks. While we're getting some incentives from the state, so I shouldn't complain to help us offset some of these costs. The local community here is very, very negative on IDAs, on any kind of property tax help. And so we're getting walloped by our property tax assessment here before we've even gotten through construction, And so it's something that I find very frustrating. There's no real attempt by the local municipality to help with this kind of stuff, right? So I definitely encourage, we got to think about the full set and holistically about the incentive regimes that are out there.
Yeah, that's a really important point, David. Thanks for making it. I think we're very fortunate to have an IDA that understood the importance of moving in this direction